Welcome, you guys. We're so happy to have you. We have been talking about doing this for like 2 years. I mean, before we had a podcast and before we'd actually done anything together, it was like this conversation about barn boundaries because it's such a relevant, I feel like, conversation for so many people. And it's literally something that's so significant in creating your experience in every day, like at the barn, at work, at home. Like it's just such a important topic and one that we all sort of know that I don't know if any of you were taught about boundaries when you were little, like I sure wasn't. I mean, maybe some of you were, but I think it's not something that is talked about quite enough. So we're glad to have that conversation, no matter how old we are or young we are. Um, we'll just start out in case there's anybody that doesn't really know us. I just panicked because I was like, oh no, I have to introduce myself. I'm Amber, and I was a problem horse trainer. I specialized in performance horses with behavioral issues for like 20 years or something. And gradually started shifting into the human side of it because it was something that I felt like continued to come up and through my own traumatic experience, started to dive into the healing process and then started to understand people and humans and all of the things. And through my own journey, created all of the things that we sort of do now. So that's kind of my background. I am a certified coach, done breath work, just a few certifications smashed in there, but really I just kind of show up however I need to show up for whoever's right in front of me. So get to use all the things. Shayleigh, you want to introduce yourself?
Wow, I want to be your friend. I am Shayleigh. My heart of hearts is in animal communication. Like I connect to animals. I get messages from mind, body, spirit. But over the last 2 years, I've been really expanding into theta healing. I've been expanding into how our energy and the way that we run our lives affects our animals. And I have a really keen interest in the physical body and diseases, illnesses, pain, stuff like that. So my focus is kind of there. And I am like a little sponge. So I'm just like a student of the horse right now. I'm studying Chinese medicine and chakras and doshas and all of these other things that I'm gonna end up talking about later. So yeah, that's me. Anything animal or anything in general.
Plants, whatever.
Yeah, plant.
Um, so we just wanted to start off for those of you that haven't ever worked with us or done any of the offerings that we've provided. I feel like our intention is always to hand the power back to you guys. So we don't ever want to show up like we know all the things. We're very open about being on our own journey alongside of you guys. And so it is our utmost intention to create a space where it's like non-judgmental. You get to be wherever you're at and it's perfectly fine. And really, for this, wanting to emphasize that your belonging and your sense of safety around asking for what you need and deserving it without having to earn it, right? Like there's a lot of beliefs and interesting things that go into boundaries that are so much more than just the sentence you need to say to somebody or space you need to create with your horse. Like there's so much more that goes into it that I don't feel like it's talked about. So that's really the intention, was to be able to give you guys this information and have you be able to like go through it on your own and not need to always question, oh my gosh, I need to find the next person to teach me this thing. It's like just to give you like some tools to actually have and carry with you. Um, like most things, this stuff is born from our own life experiences, and we will definitely say that. We both have our little stories about the boundary struggle, and which is something that happens when you set out to shift into like teaching or like coaching or anything like that. I don't know how many of you are out there that are in that space. It seems to be that you get these really deep lessons right before you're going to teach something. So we know every time we go in to create an offering that we're probably going to get it smashed in our face tenfold, which is fine. We're ready. So you can always go deeper, and it's this expansion, it's this deep understanding of where came from what it felt like to be there, and even revisiting, which is definitely what happened to me in the last couple of weeks, which is so fascinating. So all these opportunities to practice and remember, and so that you can stay empathetic for people that are sort of the beginning of the journey when you're like, oh, I don't remember what that's like because I can set boundaries and hey, it's so easy. And it's like, no, it's freaking uncomfortable sometimes. Makes you want to throw up a little bit, makes your heart pound, makes you all sweaty and like, oh God, what's gonna happen? Like it still happens, but when you get to the core of why you want to create the boundary, it becomes very significant and relevant and important to do. And then it makes it much easier. So that is really what we want to be able to give you guys. We'll just talk a little bit about probably my biggest learning around boundaries has come from I've always had a really easy time with the animals and the horses. Mine really came from personal relationships. So relationships, my ex-husband, just actually a whole string of relationships that had the same theme. And it really came from me basically abandoning myself and what I felt was right or wrong, just to become very accommodating and small, to be adaptable and relaxed and easygoing so that I could, in my mind, I felt like that was what someone would want, right? Someone that didn't, talk back, or someone that didn't push on what someone else wanted to make them uncomfortable. I just wanted to stay really small in that way. To what I realized later after kind of diving into the work is it was to keep people close to me. So it was almost this people pleasy energy, which actually has an underlying vibration of control. Not consciously, but I am trying to control my environment. I'm kind of trying to control who is in my life. And when I really started to understand the connection between what our animals and our body do for us when we are not setting boundaries. I don't know if some of you have watched the Rochelle. She is the one who I started working with when I began Theta, and then she inspired me to go through a lot of the different trainings through it. And what happened was I had a Boston Terrier, and her name was Sugar. And throughout my marriage, which was fairly toxic, anytime I would cry, she would run to me and she would put herself on me. And it was just like immediately. And I never really thought anything of it. In hindsight, I realized right before there's a lot of things that actually went into that, but I'm only going to go into one thing. Connecting it with what Rochelle's talk about lumps and tumors in the breast. So she was filled, her mammary glands were just filled with lumps. Um, and I recognize it started when we moved and I had gotten married, and all of a sudden these things started. So what I realize is when you start to understand the connection of the animals in your life, the soul contracts that they come in for those reasons, she was taking that for me so that I did not actually end up with breast cancer. So I also had to work through guilt. And then instead of shifting that to gratitude for having her, for doing that for me, for recognizing these animals come and choose to do these things with you. Um, and so that was when I realized the animals are giving you the messages, your body is giving you the messages. And if you don't listen to those messages, things get bigger. And so to take the nudge, we don't want to scare anybody, but this is something that we have both seen many a times. So it's amazing that you're all here, and I want to honor each of you for going, actually, maybe I want to look deeper at something. Maybe there is something to this boundary thing. Shayleigh, do you want to share your story?
Yeah. So I have always had pretty good boundaries in my personal relationships, but I used to be in a cycle of attracting very negative, controlling, verbally abusive mentors because I was obsessed with being the good student. I wanted to learn everything that I could, and I have this tendency of putting people on pedestals. And something that I had to learn, like, over the last couple of years is like, we're all just human. We all are equal. We just have different knowledge sets to offer each other. And my biggest thing was consistently finding these mentors who made me feel like I couldn't give an opinion. I would tell myself I didn't know enough. And so I couldn't ask questions or I couldn't advocate for my horse because I was the student and they were the teacher. And that turned into a lot of my horses having to be the guinea pigs and the brunt of these different modalities that I was learning. And something I wish I would have known many years ago that I tell everyone now is like there is no amount of knowledge that is worth feeling unsafe for. There is always a way to learn what you want to learn and feel safe doing it. That is like, I wish I would have told myself that like 30 years ago, but it really brought me a lot of insight into where I am now. And then, as you guys know, if everyone has horses, like horses are the great connectors. Like they are so good at connecting us with people that need to show our lessons to us. And through those experiences, my horses taught me a lot about boundaries. So now my lesson, it's funny because I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I've got like the professional boundaries. Now my horses are freaking pushing me around and they're like, okay, like you can't just like scoot the boundary under the rug and go somewhere else. Like now I have my horse Biggie who is constantly in my space and teaching me how to take up space. So they can show up in so many different ways and they're not always yeah, they're not always blunt. So that's kind of my story. Oh, should I talk about Chico and Clyde? Should I
Yeah.
briefly talk about that? Because that was a cool. Okay, so a lot of times we think that, like, well, we know that our horses are our mirrors, and we know that, like, what we do in our lives, like, our animals just end up being products of our environment, products of our energetic environment, their physical environment, all of that stuff. Well, I got a lesson this past year with my miniature horse Chico and this donkey, Clyde, where I learned that my animals could be like bullied or have like boundaries that aren't getting listened to just in their own dynamic. And I saw the repercussions of like what an unbalanced herd can create. So this donkey showed up on my property, long story short, ended up keeping him. And I always have matching horses. All of my horses are black or dark brown. And Chico is the little oddball. He's a little Palomino miniature horse, and he's always been perfect favorite little man. He's the only odd one. Then Clyde comes around. You guys, I kid you not. Clyde started overpowering Chico's energy by like braying every time I walked in the barn, so I couldn't hear Chico anymore. Chico was no longer in the first stall on the left. He was no longer the little oddball. And Clyde was kind of like inserting himself as like the little loud, impatient man. And that was Chico's role. Chico took it so hard in his physical body that he got parasites. He got a cough, like a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. He went to the vet multiple times to get steroids. Like all of these things started manifesting in his body, and he just kept saying, like, I'm the little one, I'm the little one. And no matter what I could do, could convince him that Clyde crossing his boundaries would be okay. Long story short, Clyde started crossing some other boundaries. So he's rehomed across the fence, like old McDonald, to another farm. And I just trimmed his feet the other day. He's great. But Chico, like a week after Clyde was gone, hasn't coughed a single time, hasn't come up with a single, like, I just did their fecal counts perfectly fine. He's back to normal. So it was just interesting to me how, like, even them, even with their own little dynamic, and how we would assume that horses create boundaries all the time, you know, like, oh, they know how to take care of themselves. Like, they still can get unbalanced in their own dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny that you have your three dark bays and then your mini, and then I have my red horses and my mini, my random mini.
I know.
Standards for being friends. Um, so we wanted to talk a little bit about what a boundary is, what it isn't, and I have you guys walk away with just a little formula, and some deeper thinkings about any specific boundaries that you guys have that you want to create or that you have floating around that need to happen. And you're like, oh, I'm trying to avoid it. Now you know why you don't really want to avoid it, because even if you think you're avoiding it, you're definitely not avoiding it. Every time you want to say yes to something and you say no, it goes in your body. Every time you want to say no to something and you say yes, it stays. It's there. The energy of it is not going anywhere. Um, and so the definition, this quote that kind of fell in love with was, The boundaries are a bridge between self-awareness and self-empowerment. It's balancing personal needs and with respect with respecting someone else's personal needs at the same time. So it goes both ways. You can't fully honor somebody else's boundaries unless you are honoring your own. So if you have judgments or you have any feelings, belief systems around what it is to even speak a boundary, it is most likely going to mirror in the way that you receive boundaries. And that actually creates an unstable partnership, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's work, whether it's with your animals. Anytime there's that imbalance and that kind of shakiness around that, it's actually creating destabilization within the partnership. So even if you feel like in my instance, when I was trying to be small and trying to be, flexible and adaptable, it was actually creating this unsafety in the relationship because whenever someone would speak a boundary to me, it almost felt like an attack. Like I had to be defensive. Like I immediately wanted to defend who I was and what they were saying. And oh, why would you want that? Because that's so weird because I'm so easygoing, like a psycho. I'm so easygoing. Why are you telling me that I need a boundary for what? And so, really understanding what a boundary is versus what like a threat is. And so I've got these little pillars clarifying what your boundaries are first. It's like really understanding what is the exact boundary that I want in this situation. Do I want space? Do I want this person to stop coming in and oversharing with me? Do I want my horse to stop stepping on my toe or shoving me out of the way? Like, what is the exact boundary that you want? And get really, really, really clear on it without any judgment around yourself. Like, oh, you'll hear that voice. It's going to come up and it's going to tell you, you don't actually like deserve that boundary, or who are you to take up that kind of space, or who are you to speak your mind? Or my ideas about things sometimes in the workplace when you're trying to be open and creative. Oh, my ideas aren't good. It's not good enough. I'm gonna stay quiet. Anything like that can kind of manifest. And so becoming very clear, what do you want and what makes you feel safe really is what it's a lot about. The second piece is understanding the reasons behind your boundaries. So like, why do you want this boundary? Do you feel like, well, I've got this like big creative think someone must have something in their workplace where they're trying to be creative because this keeps coming up. This big creative thing that wants to come through, but I'm scared to say it. I'm scared to kind of advocate for myself around that. Or is it like I actually feel unsafe in this situation? So just getting really clear on why you want to communicate the boundary. Most of the time, it's because of safety. I think when it boils down to it, I think I posted something a little while ago where it was like, safety is my love language. Because honestly, in any scenario, it boils down to where is my nervous system? And that boils down to do you feel safe or do you not? And your entire existence is sort of created around that idea, that energy of safety, of like, how can I be authentic? Can I be authentic and not be judged? And can I, say when something makes me uncomfortable and have it be received well? Part of it is caring more about how you feel in those moments than if, worrying about, we had a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to hurt people's feelings, or I don't want to, have something be misrepresented in what I say. So I just don't say anything. And at the end of the day, it's only hurting you. So kind of really diving into that. Um, and then recognizing the resistance in your body when it comes up. So when you start to think about, this is the boundary, this is why I want the boundary, and then all of a sudden you're like, and this is why I don't say the boundary. Whatever causes you to like shrink back down and close up, really sort of identifying where in my body is that happening and getting to what you believe around why this is happening. We are having a like a 3-hour workshop that we're going to dive into this stuff around, like really get into it and clear this stuff for you guys and identify it and work through this, because 50% of these boundaries that you set, we can give you an entire like word formula and say, this is where you plug this in. This is where I actually have that. This is where you plug the things in. This is what a boundary sounds like. It's, I will read it. It's, I need space because you coming into my space, physically barging into my room, into my privacy, makes me feel a little unsafe and uneasy. So if you could please knock first. If you don't knock, then I'm going to start locking my door. So the idea is you're saying, this is what I want, this is why I want it, and this is the action step I will take to keep myself safe. The boundary is not about you need to not do that. Don't do that. Don't come barging in my room. I totally hear myself actually when I say things to my kids sometimes. And I'm like, but I totally do that still. So it's okay. I just like I totally do that. So just becoming aware of like, what does this boundary that I'm setting sound like right now? And then realizing that when you set what you will do if this boundary in fact does not happen, you need to stay in integrity with it. You actually have to be willing to follow through, or you're just throwing out open threats. And 50% is the words, the other 50% is the energy behind it, which is how you feel about the boundary that you're setting. And this is where Shayleigh is going to come in and talk about that piece of it, the horse piece of it, but then also the deeper stuff we're going to dive into. That is actually what is affecting that, because the words, it's like when you're talking about boundaries with people, you can use the English language or whatever language you speak. When you're dealing with the horses, there is body language, but what predicts what the body does is the energy within it. And that is what they're reading. So we need to be able to address both things for humans and horses simultaneously in order to really anchor in like what a true authentic boundary is, and have it be received and understood in a way that doesn't feel like it wants people to put their defenses up. You want to go?
All right. I'm going to try not to go rogue
We are
because I'm
doing
very
so good.
passionate
We are
about
right on time. We are right on time. You're good.
Cool. So, okay, most everybody that I talk to that owns a horse is extremely empathetic. They have a lot of empathy and they tend to take on the energy of others. That's why the horse world, like I was talking to my husband the other day and he was like, "Why is the horse world so savage?" And I'm like, "I know it is savage. Everyone's like out to get each other." And then I'm like, "It's because everybody has so much empathy and no one knows what's theirs. Like everyone's just taking on everyone else's shit. No one knows if it's theirs or not." And so I'm on this really big kick right now of what is mine? Like lots of self-awareness. And to be honest, like if you are recognizing in your body when someone is making you feel uncomfortable, you've already won. Like you are already in the first step. And we're just trained to close our hearts all the time. And without getting too mushy, I'm obsessed with the heart space right now because it's where the animals lead. It's where, like, how many of us would describe our horses as open-hearted, or they have a kind heart, or they have a big heart, or they're so forgiving. Like, we talk about our horses' hearts all the time because they lead with it. And I know with me, my personal boundaries are typically needing to be with myself. Like I'm very self-critical. I have all of those intrusive thoughts. I can beat myself up about stuff. And so my horses right now are teaching me a lot about like being kinder to myself, opening my heart. And briefly, before I get into the stuff I want to talk about, I want to encourage you guys to think about how many times within a day that you close your heart and then you ignore that you've closed it. And you can feel it. Like if something bothers you, you can feel your heart space close. You can feel your chest tighten. And if in that moment you don't kind of sit with that and be like, okay, what does my body need to open up my heart space again? You will just keep getting triggered and you'll be surprised at how many times it happens during the day. Yeah, I feel like a lot of us end up trying to protect ourselves from not feeling bad, that we end up like putting all these different things in place instead of setting a boundary and also just committing to like having an open heart. There are actual reasons why you might do this, and I'll briefly touch on them, but I'm gonna go in like way I've hardcore nerded out for the workshop. So get ready for that. But so horses, I connected with a bunch of horses before this call and I was like, what are the things that like you really wish there were more boundaries around? And the number one thing that came up is speaking up to healthcare professionals or speaking up to professionals in general. It's so hard for people to talk to their farriers, talk to their vets, talk to their trainers. It's very difficult in the moment for many of us because we want to be the student. And also, we somehow have convinced ourselves that we simply don't know enough. But you know your horse. And I know we hear that all the time, but like you truly do know your horse. And if you are, we were taught to bully that emotion. Like, how many of us see the farrier hammering a shoe on and the horse is pulling the foot back and you can just feel it in your heart? Like, you're like, oh man, like he just needs a break or something isn't right. And we just can't say what we need to say. The more we are able to create that clarity internally and start honoring that inner dialogue, the more we'll be able to speak up from an authentic place. And it most likely will be well received because you're coming from a place of true authenticity and not that wounded space of like, I'm opening my heart and then I'm closing it again. They also talk a lot about physical touch. Like I call it forced affection. Like people will like to kiss them when they don't want to be kissed. And there's this forced affection energy. And it's all good and fun. And to be perfectly honest, when I first started out as a communicator, I used to say it and laugh. I used to be like, oh, I see you giving your horse forced affection. And I'd like kind of make a joke out of it. And now I'm like, wow, I was like that because I was constantly bullied past my own boundaries around physical touch. And I was constantly bullying myself through things like that. So naturally, you would do that with your horse. And horses really like, at the end of the day, for the most part, physical touch is not their love language, unless it's with their mouth, unless they're like biting you or whatever. But like being petted in general, I don't get a lot of horses requesting that. They just don't, like maybe scratches. But I think it's really important to honor, to really think about your own boundaries around physical touch, especially if you have a horse that's a little bit prickly around physical touch, and you'll see a lot of correlations there. A lot of horses wish that we could advocate for them to have pasture mates. Like individual turnout just kind of sucks. Some horses are more okay than others, but at the end of the day, like they are herd animals, and it's very difficult for so many people to ask for their horse to have a friend because they're afraid of getting kicked out of the barn, which is so ridiculous. I mean, what's ridiculous too is some people do get kicked out for that. So that's a whole topic in itself. Blanketing, handling to turnout, feeding schedules and ingredients. Like I can't tell you how many horses are on diets that are not serving their highest and best good. And it's because the person feels trapped in a boarding situation to feed what they're feeding, or they don't feel like they know enough to advocate for the horse, which is why for the workshop, I really wanted to include chakras and traditional Chinese medicine and doshas and emotional core wounds, because all of these things go into the makeup of why we are the way we are, why our horses are the way they are, and how they interact with the world around them. So one thing that I think is super cool that I think everyone should look into if you haven't already is human design. And it's free. You can get your chart for free. All you need to do is know your birthday, your time, and where you were born. And I'll have Amber put it somewhere. We'll put it in the Facebook group, like the link to where it goes. I was just like, oh, we'll put it somewhere. But what's cool about human design is you can find your authority, and your authority is your decision-making process. It's literally your unique blueprint based on this astrology and numerology and all these other things about your unique blueprint about why you make decisions the way you do. Some people make them through emotion. Some people make them through gut feeling. Some have critical thinking. So knowing your human design is actually like a really cool way to just give yourself permission to be the way you are and then work within those parameters. Understanding a little bit about your chakras, we have 7 main energy centers in our body, and they are all linked to organs. They're all this energetic flow in our bodies. Our horses are extremely in tune to them. And you want to talk about like connecting with horses. Well, if your root chakra is all over the place, you're trying to create a deeper partnership with them, they're going to be like, well, how can I create a deeper partnership with you? You're very unsafe right now. Like I can feel that energy. So having a general awareness of where your chakras are, what those energy centers govern, can be really helpful for you when creating boundaries. And also knowing that if someone crosses your boundary, Typically, I don't know if this is for everybody, this is definitely for me. I will feel it in a certain place in my body, like very strongly. Like, especially if I have like unresolved stuff and I like see someone in the grocery store, I'm like, oh God, like look the other way. Like I never dealt with that. And it goes to like a place in your body and you feel yourself kind of, so that's a chakra, that's your energy center. And for those of us who want to connect deeper with our horses and with ourselves, being able to figure out what's going on in that energy center, creating the awareness and learning how to open it up again is super important. The same with Chinese medicine. The elements are really, really cool because we all have unique constitutions. We have a constitutional makeup, and your horses are the same thing. So knowing, and there's a lot of resources, we'll talk about it deeper in the workshop, but knowing your horse's constitution, are they typically a horse that is more damp in their body? And it's the same with the doshas. Do you have a hot horse? Do you have a damp horse? Do you have a cold horse? Are they sluggish? Are they typically very emotional? All of these things will help guide you in creating boundaries around them. Because if you know that you have a horse that's a specific constitution, and you know, my horse is sensitive to sugar, my horse gets edema really easily, my horse is a little bit slower bodied, and you're trying to feed them sweet feed, that is going to literally go against the constitutional makeup of who he is. So it will help you have the knowledge and that like inner strength to be like, hey, this is literally bad for my horse. But I think a lot of times we just don't know enough. Like we haven't dived down enough rabbit holes. Well, I have, and that's why I want to bring them to you so that we can like speak up to people. And the one thing that I want to go into just a little bit, do I have time to go into depth with the emotional wounds?
Yeah, you have
Okay.
at least, yeah, you're fine.
So I just want to go into a little bit of depth with emotional core wounds. And my knowledge of this is based on the teachings of Tammy Billups. She talks about 5 core wounds, and they're always mirrored in us. And she calls them a cloak of protection. And so I'll just like go into them and I'll explain a little bit about each of them. So there's the scared one, which is a horse that would be rooted in terror, feel like the world is not safe, very ungrounded, super intelligent, but just kind of fearful. And that fear can kind of turn into aggression and like really stuck in their fight or flight, spooky. They also learn really quickly and they're like super fun to train, but people would most likely call them unpredictable. That's like the scared one. The sensitive ones are your sponges. They're very aware and affected by like their environment. They can tend to have weak boundaries due to being over controlled early on. They can be people pleasers. They're the horses that fawn really easily. Typically, they have this like nervous eating habit, so they can be overeaters. They're very emotionally driven, and they don't often like know their emotions from others. So this is the like, is this mine energy? The protector usually originates from betrayal. So like if you have a really dominant horse or like a horse that's like very proactively aggressive, proactively dominant, typically they are trying to protect their hearts and create safety because they're worried about being betrayed in some way. These are the horses that people probably label as like bad or dominant or difficult, hard to handle. These horses often get passed around and get labeled as behavioral. Then you have the needy one. This is the most frequently used cloak of protection, and it's rooted in abandonment. And these horses are very codependent. They love affection. They want to be on top of you. They're herd bound. They're worried about where their friends are. They have this core feeling of being unlovable, and they're really seeking like that attention. They can be very jealous if you spend time with other horses. They can have issues with their weight, and they're constantly looking for that good boy or good girl. And then the last one is the perfect one. And these horses are typically horses that are like the schoolmasters. Their outer world is perfect. They're kind of non-emotional. They're independent. They don't really seek affection. They're very consistent. They're safe. They're grounded. Typically, this core wound, the horses are often born to like a mom who was like not really like emotionally available. And they are also very spiritually driven. Like the perfect one energy is typically like those horses that change your life forever. Like they're the ones that cause you to go down all these different rabbit holes. They're the ones that cause you to stand up for yourself or change disciplines or whatever. They're kind of like your, well, I say heart horse because I have a perfect one and he's my heart horse. So I don't know if that's actually true, but like they're definitely, they invite big change, and you kind of get this sense that you don't really know the full depth of who they are. Like you love them for who they are, but you kind of feel like they're a little distant. So I wanted to explain all of those because if you wrote down that you labeled one of your horses, one of those core wounds, know that these core wounds, they mirror in us. So just briefly recapping, the scared one is not safe. The sensitive one doesn't know their emotions compared to others, like they really take a lot of stuff on. The protector is trying to protect themselves from betrayal. The needy one has wounds of abandonment. And the perfect one is this sense of having to have it all together on the outside and trying to keep things together on the inside. Like you're just not fully connected to the essence of who you are because you were raised by someone who was emotionally detached and you were taught to detach from your own emotions. So knowing these cloaks and knowing how you would typically label your horse can just kind of help you understand why you do or don't create boundaries, and also a little bit more about like their internal language, their love language, the core thing that you guys are mirroring so that you can start protecting that or unwinding things around that. So I want to talk about the Great Awakening, but I'll let you go first because if we run out of time for it, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just post it all over Facebook.
I feel like that stuff's so relevant and important because in that piece of knowing that you want to set a boundary and you're like, okay, like, why is this so hard? When you're starting to get curious and kind of investigate, sometimes it's nice to have, I don't know, actually nice probably isn't the word, but it makes it easier if you have something on the outside of you mirroring that for you, to give you clues to sort of identify. Like if you have a coach, they're going to do that for you. But if you're aware enough of what is really going on, you can use that as information to sort of dive deeper. Part of a big part of the workshop that we wanted to do is to be able to give you the you whoa, there's a portal and it takes you in depth with all of these things. It has all of the information in there, and then you guys will get a PDF to go through and pull out the relevant things that you'll need for the workshop so that when we dive in to the 3 hours, you're really going to have all that in front of you, and we'll be able to weave it all in together and really anchor that in. The piece I wanted to do today was I had asked, and if you guys didn't do this, you can come up with it as off the top of your heads, because I'm sure everyone has something floating around. Um, to think of that boundary that you want to set, whether it's with your horse, whether it's somebody at work, or whether it's like someone in your personal life, whatever that looks like, and sort of just think about what that sentence sounds like that you would say to them, where you are saying what you want, what you would appreciate. You are saying why, and then you're saying this is what will happen. You guys can think about it, you can write it down, but just take like 2 minutes and just like get really clear on what that looks like or sounds like even in your head. Um, because I want to take you into like a little quick visualization. What is it? 1244, where you can sort of start to feel into this piece. And then when you guys have yours, just drop it like a Y for yeah or a yes in the chat. And really having those three components. So like I'm really clear on what I want. This is why I want it. And this is what will happen if I do not get it. Perfect. I know somebody had said they wanted that quote, and I'll put it in the Facebook group. Um, it's also in the link that we'll give you at the end. And we'll send out the replay for this. And could you give an example? Yeah, let's see. I guess my own example in the way that I did it improperly the other day was I basically live in the mudroom. We have a very small cottage and I have two kids, and then my space, my bed is in the room where like people go in and out of the house. So like there's just sometimes where I just want everyone to leave me alone. So it would sound something like, hey, I really would appreciate 15 minutes of undisrupted time for me to meditate. If you could please, give that space to me. If it's an urgent emergency, please knock. If you don't do that, I'll end up either locking my door or going down to the barn. And then if that boundary is crossed, then I would actually, in fact, either lock my door or leave. um, it's not about don't do that to me. You don't do that. It makes me angry or it frustrates me and it makes you bad for not honoring what I've said. That's the threat. That's what is going to create kind of defensive-ness. So it's more of this is how I feel. This is why I feel this way. Choose to honor it or not. Either way, I'm honoring what I need and I'll go do the thing. All right. We have a lot of whys. So I want you guys to like just close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to take a nice deep breath. And I want you to imagine yourself in the scenario where you are expressing this boundary, communicating this boundary, whether it's to a person, whether it's to an animal. I know someone said that they were working with boundaries with their dogs, so we don't want to limit just to horses, obviously. And just put yourself in that scenario. See it, feel it, use that active imagination to pull yourself in. This is where we can shapeshift. And I want you to hear yourself, see yourself, feel yourself saying this boundary to this person or animal. And I want you to pay close attention, and you can say it a couple times. Pay close attention to what it makes you feel like in your body. Does your heart want to stay open when you say it? Or do you want to close off? Do you get hot? Do you want to not say anything? Just sort of identify like what is the response that your body gives when you put yourself in the scenario of creating this boundary and communicating it. And then when you are done and you've identified it, drop it in the comments. You can just use one word if you want. You can say where you felt it. You can say, I don't want to do that. I didn't like that. However it made you feel, just drop it in. Ooh, someone got chills. That's kind of fun. I'm into that. I like chills. And really what we want to do for you guys is just dive deep into this stuff. Having that like real understanding of this is me, this is my horse, how is it mirroring in me? What is mine? What is theirs? It's not the same. My face gets hot and my chest tightens, anxiety, felt a sense of peace. You can just see, like, we did ask the question, I think in our tea house membership. No, maybe it was the actual barn boundaries where we asked for just one word, and the vast difference in the experience of boundaries for people was so wild. But it all literally boils down to the same thing. Like, do I feel worthy of safetyness? Like, and has, when I grew up, was it received? Was that given to me? Was I told I have permission to even take up space or say how I felt? Was any of that even validated for me? And really just going back into that core piece, those core woundings that Shayleigh was talking about, going in and going, wait a minute, is this actually true? And how many places is my am I living from just because I have this old programming that you are not usually conscious of? Like we live our lives in 90% of our unconscious, which is our body, which is our felt sense. The body is the unconscious mind. So when you're having all these sensations and we've been taught to just disregard the discomfort, numb it out, disassociate, whatever that looks like, when you start to come back into your body and go, how do I actually feel about this? You start to recognize this is why the experience I'm having, this is why the relationships I'm having, this is why everything at work, in my personal life, with my horse, with my dog, this is why this stuff is manifesting, because the energy of what I'm actually experiencing is what is creating that, not just the words. The words are superficial. We all know what it feels like when somebody comes to us and we're like, hey, how are you doing today? And they're like, fine. You're like, no, you're not fine. Like, whether or not they need to divulge and dump on you, no, but the idea is that you can still feel it. And that is how the horses literally exist. So they're great partners to have in the teaching, but your body is also a great way to learn. And so when you start to tap into it, you're like, oh, well, I don't really actually, that doesn't really feel that great, actually. And then you can start to go, why not? Why doesn't this feel great? The other piece that I really wanted to do, which might make some of you uncomfortable, but I am inviting you to dive into the discomfort so that you can lessen the discomfort you will have and the physical things that you will have manifest greatly by dipping into something that feels a little vulnerable. Is I really wanted at the end of this workshop, after we dive into all this other stuff, we can extract this boundary that needs to be created in your life and have you guys practice actually saying it out loud to somebody and having it be received in a place that's not safe. And a lot of you are going to go, oh, like I think we did breakout rooms in I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't that long ago. And I literally get so hot and sweaty. And I don't mind connecting and talking to people and being vulnerable, obviously. Like, but the moment I get into a breakout room, I'm like, oh God, oh God. And but like think about that piece of, yeah, but knowing you're in a safe space with other people that are on that same journey that are like, we're here to like allow you to do that in a safe way to give your nervous system a chance to go, wait a minute, I didn't die. And on the receiving side, you guys get to practice that attunement of, where do I feel like it is coming from that person? Can I tap into, is it something that I would actually receive, or would it be something that would make me defensive? So you're getting real-time feedback from people receiving those boundaries and allowing you to go, how can I adjust this? Do I need to stand up? Do I need to shake it out? Do I need to scream it out? Do I need to breathe and come back into my body before? And really having that practice of speaking that boundary into on the outside of yourself and going, I've done it enough times because I'm not interested in having, like, I want it to be very impactful for you.
She looks like she's still frozen, guys. We always have an awkward ending with our things. How about now? Is it better on my end? All right. I'm back. Oh yeah, Kelly, Spirit has spoken. Okay, let me just wrap this up really quick. Okay, one thing that I feel when we are setting boundaries, and it just speaks to what Amber was saying around like the self-awareness piece, the non-threatening part of it. Our horses do not receive our boundaries very well, or our animals in general, when we speak in a negative. So if we say, don't bite me, or don't do that, or stop doing that, I don't like that, it's never well received by them, because the way that they receive our energy and interpret it is they pull the picture from our mind. So they feel like the negative energy and the picture. And so if you are working on boundaries with an animal and it's around like physical touch or biting or invading your space or a behavioral issue, it's always better to like redirect their energy. So for example, my boundary with Biggie right now is don't shove your head into me, when I'm with you. So instead of saying like, don't do that, which is what I used to do with him, I would say, stay over there, please. And I would reward him when he's over there. Or I would just hold the intention. It's funny because Amber and I had this whole conversation around it. And then I never even had to follow through with my physical boundary because I came so strong in my energy of this is what I'm needing. I need my personal space to be okay. And it feels good for you to be over there. So when you're working with your animals, instead of saying like, don't do that, don't do this, try to find a redirect of something that you would appreciate them doing. That's like a really important thing. And then to close, the Great Awakening is something that I'm super passionate about right now. I don't know if you guys feel it, but it's like a big part of the equine community where people are just becoming more compassionate. There's, more compassionate training. There's a lot of awareness around their bodies, what they are and aren't capable of. There's more emotion going into everything. And I think it's really important to give yourselves a lot of grace in this process because we really have always been taught to close our hearts. Like I was resonating with all of you guys when you were like, my heart closes. I'm obsessed with the heart space right now because I'm like, is there really anything worth closing your heart over? Like truly, because anytime we do close our heart, where does it really get us anyway? Like we have the thought processes that go through our mind that how many times do we have like an argument with the person before we even see them and we're closing our heart over nothing, and then you have the argument and it might not even turn out the way that you thought it was going to. So being able to recognize how you feel, sitting with that. So like after this call, go into that moment again where your heart starts to close and ask yourself, like, what do I need right now? How can I open my heart again? And ultimately, it's really just allowing that sensation to pass through your body and know, like, kind of how Amber said, like, I didn't die. Like, I didn't die, but also you can choose to let that energy through your body. And when you do start tailoring, and this is what the Great Awakening is about, the Great Awakening is an animal-led shift away from the entitlement to another state of being. So to their body, their spirit. It's like an awareness of self. And the more that we lead with an open heart and we tend to our own needs and we start to figure out what makes us feel safe, we no longer try to change or manipulate others to create that safety. We just cultivate that safety within, and that's ultimately what the horses especially, all animals, but horses especially are teaching this. So we're really grateful you guys joined. We
I'm back.
are hosting a workshop. Oh, you're back?
Jeez, you guys, the energy. It was like so wild. If I could, I took video of what was happening. It was like everything was blinking and everything was like unmuting and muting. It was crazy. Yes, we're back. Oh, good. Perfect
Okay.
time. We're gonna send out, we'll send you guys out the replay and then we'll send you the information on the workshop if you want to join us. It is on the 23rd of March. The little sales page has all the stuff on it for you guys. So if you guys want to dive deeper, then we're here for you and it's gonna be freaking rad. And I don't know, we're gonna deal with the vibes that are happening, our little energetic interference happening out here. So we'll bring more crystals, I guess,
Yeah.
next time. Um so good to hear from you guys.
Thank you.
If it came up for you guys during this, even if you're watching the replay, share in the group. Go in there and feel free to share. For the next 48 hours, if you guys do want to sign up, we're going to do a little coupon for you. So you guys will get that in the email too. So yay. Can't wait to hear about all your stuff in the group. We'll see you guys later.
Yeah.